Carter, you think this is summer camp? Sergeant Hill's voice tore through the morning air like a grenade blast. Why are you even here? You look like you belong behind a desk, not on a battlefield. Ava didn't move. Her eyes remained locked straight ahead. No, sir, she said calmly. Her calmness irritated him even more. You say, no, sir, like you mean it, recruit. He roared. Yes, sir, she replied, voice sharp, disciplined. The other recruits snickered. A few of them had already labeled her, the quiet girl who won't last a week. She was small, not fragile, but the kind of small that made people underestimate her. The men in her squad whispered behind her back, betting she'd wash out before training was over. But what none of them knew, not even Sergeant Hill, was that Ava Carter had seen more in her 26 years than most of them would in a lifetime. As the days at boot camp dragged on, Ava stayed silent but never slow. She ran every lap, climbed every wall, did every push-up without complaint. When others gasped for air or cursed under their breath, she finished quietly and waited for the next command. It wasn't arrogance, it was discipline, the kind that came from something deeper than basic training. Private Daniels, the self-proclaimed alpha of the group, made her his favorite target. Hey, Carter, he'd say loud enough for everyone to hear, you sure you signed up for the army? I heard the Girl Scouts are still recruiting. Everyone laughed. Ava didn't respond. She simply walked past him, her expression unreadable. At night, when the barracks went quiet and the laughter turned into snoring, Ava would sit on her bunk, cleaning her weapon with almost meditative precision. The soft sound of the metal slide and oiling cloth was the only thing keeping her grounded. There was a small scar above her left wrist, circular, faint, but unmistakably from a bullet. No one noticed, until the obstacle course test. It was a grueling day, rain, mud, and wind. The recruits were ordered to complete a full endurance circuit, crawling under barbed wire, hauling sandbags, climbing a 10-foot wall, and running 5 miles to finish. Daniel smirked at Ava when they lined up. Try to keep up, sweetheart, he said. Ava gave him a look, not angry, not hurt, just a look that made him strangely uncomfortable. The whistle blew. They launched forward. Daniel sprinted ahead, laughing as the mud splattered his face. Ava moved differently, efficient, silent, and fast. She didn't waste energy on swagger or noise. Every movement was deliberate, every breath measured. Halfway through, Daniel slipped on the muddy hill and twisted his ankle. The others passed him, one by one, shouting jokes. Ava was the last to reach him, and she stopped. You good? She asked, kneeling beside him. He groaned, embarrassed. Go. I'm fine. But she didn't. She wrapped his arm around her shoulder, helped him stand, and they finished the course together. By the time they reached the finish line, Sergeant Hill was staring, not with anger, but with something close to surprise. That night, Daniels didn't joke about her. He didn't say a word at all. Later in the week came the final challenge, the hand-to-hand combat test. One-on-one sparring, no holding back. The rules were simple. Fight until one person couldn't continue. Daniels volunteered first. When Hill asked for an opponent, Ava stepped forward. The men in the circle burst into laughter. Come on, Sarge, she's half his size. But Hill nodded. Your choice, Carter. Ava removed her cap and walked to the center of the mat. She tied her hair back, her expression still calm. The whistle blew. Daniels lunged first. Big mistake. Ava sidestepped, caught his wrist, twisted it, and used his momentum to flip him flat on his back. The thud echoed across the gym. Gasps filled the air. Daniels groaned in pain, clutching his shoulder. Hill's whistle blew again. Carter wins. Silence. Ava simply nodded and stepped back into formation. That night, whispers spread across the base. Who was she? How did she fight like that? Why did she move like someone who'd already seen combat? The next morning, while the recruits showered, Hill walked into check uniforms for inspection readiness. Ava had just finished changing into her fatigues. When she turned her back to grab her cap, her shirt lifted slightly, revealing something inked across her upper back. The sight froze him. A black, detailed tattoo of a winged dagger surrounded by the words, "Who dares wins." Hill's breath caught. That was the insignia of the British SAS, Special Air Service. He stared, speechless for a moment. His military brain started racing. That wasn't something a random recruit would just get. That tattoo was earned. It meant elite-level training, lethal precision, and classified missions. He stepped closer, quietly. Carter, he said lowly. She straightened immediately. Yes, sir. Where did you get that tattoo? Ava turned, her expression unreadable again. London, sir. Hill's brow furrowed. You serve with them. She didn't answer. Hill just nodded slowly. Carry on. When he left the barracks, he didn't say a word to anyone. But something had shifted. The next day, the commander himself, Colonel Mason, showed up during the morning drills. A man known for his cold, hard eyes and zero tolerance for excuses. The recruits lined up, nervous. Mason rarely appeared during training unless something serious was going on. He walked down the line, inspecting each recruit. When he stopped in front of Ava, his gaze lingered. You're Carter. Yes, sir. He studied her face for a moment longer. Then his eyes drifted to the faint outline of the tattoo showing beneath her collar. His expression hardened, but not out of anger. It was recognition. For a split second, something flickered behind his eyes, shock, maybe even guilt. Where did you serve before this, soldier? He asked quietly. Ava's jaw tightened. Overseas, sir. Classified operations. The colonel's face went pale. He took one small step back, his voice suddenly softer. You were with Task Echo. The other recruits exchanged confused looks. No one knew what that meant. But the silence between Ava and the colonel told them this was no normal recruit story. Ava met his eyes. Yes, sir. Until everything went dark, the colonel's throat tightened. He looked like he'd seen a ghost. Because he had. She wasn't supposed to be alive. To be continued. The air around the training field turned heavy. Nobody understood why the colonel suddenly froze, his jaw tight, his eyes locked on the quiet girl everyone had mocked just days ago. Sergeant Hill cleared his throat. Sir, is everything all right? Colonel Mason didn't answer right away. He just looked at Ava, really looked at her, as though trying to confirm she was real. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady but strange. Carter, dismissed from formation. With me. Every recruit's head turned as Ava followed him across the yard toward the command building. Daniels muttered, damn, what did she do? Hill said nothing. He just watched her go, a flicker of realization dawning in his eyes. Inside the colonel's office, the door shut behind them with a soft thud. Mason walked to his desk, set down his cap, and turned to her. You were in Helmand Province, he said quietly. Ava's posture didn't change. Yes, sir. He nodded slowly, his voice lowering. Operation White Dagger. For the first time since she arrived. Ava's eyes wavered. You were there, she said softly. Mason inhaled sharply, memories flashing through his mind, the smoke, the screams, the night vision flicker of gunfire in a desert storm. I led the extraction team, he said. They told me your squad was wiped out. Every last one of you. Ava's gaze dropped for a second, then rose again, steady and cold. They almost were. He took a step closer, disbelief tightening his jaw. You survived 3 weeks behind enemy lines. Alone. She didn't respond, but her silence was enough. Mason leaned back against the desk, rubbing his temples. You should have been decorated, Carter. Instead, you disappear for 3 years and show up here, at a basic training camp. Her expression softened, almost weary. I didn't come back for medals, sir. I came back to start over. He studied her for a long moment. You're not supposed to exist, you know that. I'm aware, sir. Outside, the echo of recruits shouting in formation faded into the distance. Inside that office, there was only the weight of 2 soldiers remembering a war they couldn't forget. Mason finally sighed. All right, you'll stay in this unit. Nobody needs to know who you are, or what you've done. But I'll be watching, Carter. Yes, sir. She saluted sharply and turned to leave. Before she could reach the door, he said quietly, and Carter, what happened to the rest of Task Echo? She paused. A flicker of grief shadowed her eyes. They didn't make it, but I did, because someone told me once, who dares wins. Then she walked out. The following days at Bootcamp were different. The jokes stopped. The laughter around Ava faded, replaced by something else, respect, mixed with curiosity. Daniels didn't speak to her at all, but when she passed, he nodded slightly. That was his version of an apology. Sergeant Hill watched her like a hawk, though not to criticize her now, to learn. He began observing her movements during drills, the way she anticipated commands before they were given, how her eyes constantly scanned her surroundings. It wasn't normal behavior for a recruit. It was instinct, combat instinct. One night, during a thunderstorm, a power outage swept across the base. Lights went dead, alarms flickered, and recruits started shouting. Someone had tripped a security line at the perimeter. Hill grabbed his flashlight, barking orders, "Everyone, stay put." But before he could reach the main door, Ava was already gone. Minutes later, the base sirens wailed. Security teams swarmed the perimeter, and found a trespasser, unconscious, zip-tied, with a knife in his hand and a map of the facility stuffed into his pocket. Ava stood over him, drenched in rain, breathing calmly. Mason arrived within minutes. "What the hell happened here?" Hill pointed. "Sir." Carter neutralized him. "Alone." The colonel turned to her. "How did you know?" Ava shrugged lightly. He was using old infiltration routes from Echo's files. Only someone inside the system would have known those. Mason's stomach dropped. That wasn't random. That was deliberate. She was right. Later that night, as the suspect was dragged off in handcuffs, Mason met her outside the barracks. Rain still poured, thunder rumbling in the distance. "Who do you think sent him?" he asked. She hesitated. "Whoever's cleaning up the past, sir." He stared at her. Meaning, they're not done with Task Echo. Or with me. For the first time, the colonel's iron composure cracked. "Carter, you need protection. I'll have you transferred." "No," she interrupted. "If they're coming for me, they'll come here. I'll end it here." He shook his head. "You can't fight ghosts." She looked him dead in the eyes. "You can if you've already been one." The next morning, the base was back to routine, on the surface, at least. But the energy had changed. Ava trained harder, sharper, faster. She wasn't just a recruit anymore. She was preparing. Daniels approached her quietly during weapons drills. "Hey, Carter." She looked up. He rubbed the back of his neck. "About before, I was a jerk. You didn't deserve that." Ava smiled faintly. "You're not wrong. But thanks." He nodded awkwardly and walked off. That night, Mason received a classified call. The words on the other end made his face go pale again. The caller said, "She's not safe. Echo's leak wasn't closed. They know she's alive." Before Mason could respond, the line went dead. At 0300 hours, the explosion hit. Barracks windows shattered. The shockwave knocked recruits off their bunks. Smoke filled the corridors as alarms screamed. Mason and Hill rushed through the chaos, barking commands, pulling soldiers to safety. "Where's Carter?" Mason shouted. Nobody knew. Through the haze, a figure emerged from the smoke, Ava, carrying 2 wounded recruits over her shoulders. Her uniform was torn, blood streaked down her temple, but her eyes were steady. "They hit the fuel line," she shouted. "Secondary charges are planted near the armory." Mason froze. "How the hell do you know that?" "Because I found the detonator before it went off." They moved together, sprinting across the base toward the armory. Bullets suddenly ripped through the dark, intruders in tactical gear, moving like ghosts. Ava dropped into cover and returned fire with ruthless precision. Hill watched her in awe, every shot calculated, efficient, deadly. This wasn't a recruit fighting for survival. This was a soldier remembering who she was. When the gunfire stopped, Mason found her kneeling beside one of the fallen intruders. She pulled off his mask, and froze. It was someone she knew. "Captain Rains," she whispered. He was Echo. Mason's chest tightened. Jesus Christ, they turned their own. Ava looked up at him. "Now you understand why I came back. It wasn't to start over. It was to finish this." The dawn broke through the smoke, the base still smoldering. Ambulances arrived, soldiers limped, medics shouted, and in the middle of it all, Ava stood silent, watching the sun rise over the wreckage. Mason walked up beside her. "They'll write this up as a terrorist attack," he said quietly. "Let them," she replied. "They'll never know what really happened." He looked at her, the woman who'd survived the impossible, who carried a ghost's tattoo on her back and the weight of an entire fallen unit on her shoulders. "What now, Carter?" She turned to him, her expression calm but resolute. "Now, we rebuild, and when they come again," she loaded her rifle and slung it across her back. "We'll be ready." For a long moment, Mason just watched her, part soldier, part legend, then nodded. Some heroes wear medals, others just carry scars, and a tattoo that once made a commander freeze.